As an ANC member, I won't take a full 10 minutes, but good morning everybody. I've been asked to speak as an ANC. I also speak as somebody who regards himself still as a rural boy. I have worked in Joburg for the last 40 years, but I always say that I'm typical Amagoduka. I go back home every Christmas, and I've probably been at home in the rural area 65 times for Christmas in my year. I had a few years when I was a student where I didn't get there, but that is where I've grown up, and that is where I'm at home, in the rural area in the Eastern Cape. And as an ANC member, I grew up within the ANC, and this year in fact, I would have been a member in my own right for 50 years, 1969 to now. And I am appalled. I'm appalled that the ANC in Parliament can be pushing these bills, TKLB, TCB particularly. Because in my experience, the ANC fought against tribalism. As a small child, I grew up at Fort Hare. Fort Hare in 1916, when it was founded, admitted men and women as equals. When universities elsewhere in the world were still discriminating against women, Fort Hare said, no, we will have women and men as equals. And people came from all over the country. If you look at a list of Fort Hare alumni, they are from every part of this country and from all over Southern and East Africa. That was the tradition. People knew each other, and it was the colonial government and the apartheid government that promoted tribalism. It was the colonial government that said, no, this tribe lives here, this tribe lives there. But the apartheid government took it on even more. When it was removing people from Safar Town here in Joburg, it said, no, Zulus must go to this part of Soweto, and Shangans must go to that part, and Xhosas must go to that part, Sotho somewhere else. They tried to promote tribalism. And I'm appalled that this ANC government is continuing that, is strengthening tribalism. That is not what people fought for. It is not what the struggle was about. The struggle was for one country with equal rights for everybody. Everybody should be equal before the law, and as speakers have pointed out, these TKLB, TCB are striving to make 17 million people second-class citizens under a different set of laws. So that's my take as an ANC member. And I'm not worried if the SG were to accuse me of ill discipline. It is appalling, and we've got to continue to fight within the ANC to say, listen, stop, think, what are you doing? And I think there's still a chance that we may get the TCB stopped in the National Council of Provinces. Not a very good chance, but it's worth pushing for it. I think there's a slightly better chance of persuading the President not to sign these bills into law until at least he's checked the constitutionality of, and referred them to the Constitutional Court. And I think we must push for it very hard. And because I don't think they will stand up in the Constitutional Court. But just passing them will cause even more trouble. The two last points that I want to make relate to what do we do going forward. Yes, we've got to stop these bills, but that isn't the end in itself. We've heard this morning of some of the problems that have been created already. How do we support communities? Comrade from KZN, where mining licenses have already been granted, mining is happening. How do we manage forward? How do we assist those communities to come up with plans for that community as to what do they do? Whether houses have been built, these expensive houses built on people's land, what is the way forward there? And people need our support, and it's not one solution for everybody, but in individual communities, so that while we focus on stopping the bills, we must start to think about, okay, we stop the bills, that's not the end. What do we do going forward? So that, I think, is really important, and that is in all the different communities. How do we undo or move forward from the damage that has already been done? You know, the damage that's already been done in the Amadiba community, where people have been pitted against each other. How do we help people to move forward to restore community? And then the last point I just want to throw out for consideration is, how do we restore the dignity of farming? Because where I come from, small-scale farming, growing your own vegetables, growing your own mealies, whatever it is, because most people don't have access to grazing land, but a lot of people have some access to some plot of land. But working that land is seen as really not a respectable thing to do. It's not a dignified thing to be doing. And we've got to change that, because we've got to help to restore the dignity of actually being a small-scale farmer where you look after your own land and you feed your family. But the first thing is to stop those bills going through, and I think we need maximum pressure from all sorts of civil groups and from within the ANC as well as outside the ANC to try and stop them. Thank you.
You know, a few days ago I had occasion to remark about how I felt diminished by the actions of Ace Makashule, who is the Secretary General of the African National Congress. In the long history of the ANC, there's never been a Secretary General like that. When he had launched a visceral attack on Derek Honeycomb, who had been was attacked for being a charlatan and so on and so forth. I felt diminished by that as a member of the ANC. You know, today I feel wholesomely enriched sitting in this theater and listening to people who are talking. I'm not good at flattering and so on, speaking from my heart. Just to listen to people who know what they are talking about, in their humility, who nevertheless deliver stuff that makes you feel so isolated from the real people of this country. I experienced a similar thing on the 18th of July when I was invited to speak in Port Elizabeth. It was arcade. And I had prepared my PowerPoint because I thought I was invited by the ANC regional team there, and I thought I would be talking to business people, politicians, and all the high and mighty. And closer to the time, I discovered that I was talking to people from the community. I had enough time to throw my speech away and really try to speak from the heart on issues that affect the people. And you're always reinforced when you talk to people who are still close to the values that we always cherish. So my involvement in this struggle was inspired by the likes of Nelson Mandela, Sisulu, many other people who never get mentioned, who were fighting a very difficult time, a very difficult struggle against oppression and entailed in that struggle were values, ethics, and issues of integrity. We are living at a time now when democracy was achieved. I just want to quote a little bit, do it all in less than 10 minutes. What Tambo used to say, Oliver Tambo, say, comrades, the purpose of the struggle is to overthrow the apartheid racist regime and replace it with a democratic and, he always said, an ethical system of government. Much as we have become very corrupt in handling politics in the urban areas, we have actually not just sold out the people in rural areas. We have, as people have said so eloquently here, actually adopted what the apartheid government used to do. Traditional leaders we always have had, but we've got a lot of them which were created by the apartheid system. And these are the people that are supposed to make decisions now on behalf of people whose land was taken in the first instance by colonialism and apartheid, and then we came and converted a lot of those things and called them state land. So where you sit here with the title deeds to a quarter acre of land or so many square meters of land, people, 18 million of them approximately, have absolutely no such right. So we're creating two nations, one that is clearly beyond the page here, and another that seems to matter because it is in towns, it speaks a lot of English, and all of those things. It is said, but I don't want to just whip up emotion, one needs empowerment here to at least address one of the issues that the organization to which I still belong and which I will continue to belong to. Because when you stop, you regress. Things don't just become stationary. One day, I made a statement that I wouldn't vote for the ANC, and everybody was so happy about that. I reviewed that and said, I think we still need to vote for it because given what we have today in politics, there's corruption across the board. If there are young people here who think highly of Malema and the FF, I've never seen people who are so corrupt before they even get into power. How they will deal with the resources that will be entrusted to them. Something we've got the Democratic Alliance, unfortunately, which really doesn't know that 25 years after 1994, which is still represented by the majority of white people in Parliament. So one thought maybe if we had better opposition, I might cross the floor, but there's really nothing. So one must sit and strengthen the party that was founded by very, very honest people, committed, taking risks and take our react to the values. I really will not pretend that there is any input that I can provide. I'll need some clarification. There is a bill that I think it says informal protection of, interim protection of, yeah, it's interim. I always worry that interim things might pass before the things are restored. It's what helped, I think, the Zulu people, where the judge said there's that, and it makes that provision. I worry about interim. You may explain to us. And when it didn't feature on the board here, gosh, I hope it's not overlooked, because it's really what saved the day for the people of KwaZulu. We do have, happily, a very progressive justice system in this country. You know, we have amazing people who are not just familiar with the law, chief justices and so on, even everybody's witnesses. No one is innocent. You know, they have taken up the cause of the common people, and we will do what we can in the ANC. We'll invite, we'll advise, try and persuade, cajole the President Cyril Ramaphosa never to sign these bills that have been approved by this NCOT and President. We'll raise a hue and cry. We will seek your wisdom on how we should climb to the highest buildings and say this cannot be done. It has to be referred at least to the Constitutional Court. I still have confidence that if he's afraid of taking action and saying morally I feel unable to do this thing, he would say I need the opinion of the judges in the Constitutional Court, justices there. This is just unthinkable. We talk about it, it's unthinkable that a party that has continued to be given the trust of the people, thanks to the people who founded it. And by the way, my three Msimangs at the foundation of this thing, and one of them, Richard Msimang, was tasked, if you read the light of his book, to chronicle the difficulties that people experienced as a result of the Native Land Act of 1913. So he did that for the ANC. So we may not allow these people to do the rubbish they're doing now, just for that reason, for some things. So the other point that I thought should be looked at is the EIAs, environmental impact assessments, which seem to reside within the Department of Mineral Resources. I think there is a serious conflict given some of the things that are happening here. Olobeni, if people were consulted and other things were done, one of the things that would have needed to be done is a proper environmental impact assessment, because that would have told anybody who wanted to do mining that was a no-no. So before you even involve people in whether they want mining or they want agriculture, tourism, mining is a no-no. They are very fragile dunes which would be seriously destabilized in the mind by mining in that area. So there should have been no argument at all. No license is given without a proper EIA in terms of the suitability of that area for mining, to say nothing. The last point is to say, empower us who don't know, who sometimes are just strong enough, strong-headed, and say things that we don't know well, with knowledge from this forum. I mean, there are experts here, and I'm not bluffing. Each person who stood up to talk about their respective issues spoke from a serious, depth of knowledge. would like to join hands with yourselves and use the platforms to inform the balance of the South Africans. 1857 minus 18, there is an appalling level of ignorance about the issues that are being discussed here. So you have people that drift from rural areas into urban areas, complicates the situation even more. There is no rural development program worth the name in this country. Absolutely nothing. You see some initiatives that are taking place. Talking to Tim a little earlier about medical cannabis, which employs so many people in Canada. It's one of the most serious countries about issues of human rights and so on. In the United States, in many countries, we have it being licensed now. And the licenses, the recolonization is going to take place yet again, because these licenses will be given to people with no commitment to communities. And we want to say, why don't you link it to anybody who's got a plot of land? 1 hectare is enough. If you grow, it employs 7 people. Per hectare you can employ 7 people on the growth of it. It's a harvest, it's a crop that is harvested twice a year, 3 times under ideal conditions. And our people have been growing this forever and a day. And the moralists have been talking about things they didn't quite know. One is not saying, please, this is a wonderful thing, but medical cannabis provides a potential solution to some of the problems in rural areas, but it needs to be managed properly. You still need to fence those 1 hectare things. The government, if it paid people to provide those fences, if it linked any license that it gave to a commitment by the licensee that they would employ at least, even if you said 100,000 people, they would be able to. People with 50 hectares of land growing this thing, it's serious money. But again, you see the people who took the land, using it now, away even from the wines and so on, to do this cannabis. And the communities will be left in the lurch. When will our government learn to come back to the people? Who will use that? This is one example. I think there are very many other things that can be done instead of just talking about the Department of Rural Development and so on. And by the way, I heard our president saying that Nganyama Trust would not be touched. He has no right to decide what happens.
Yes. So we're going to have our last speaker. So Aninka Claassens, who is the Chief Researcher at LARC, will be closing us off with how these bills are facilitating dispossession of the President.
Well, just to say that the Stop the Bantustan Bill campaign got a major boost from the Presidential Land Commission report, because that report also recommended that the President shouldn't sign any of these bills into law, and talked about their contradictory nature and the problems specifically that women have with traditional leadership and with land rights. And also that commission recommended, just as the Motlanthe High-Level Panel recommended, that Ipilra, which as Mr. Mavuso has told us, has been this crucial form of defense that was crucial both to the Tolobeni judgment and to the Maledu judgment. They both recommended that it be made permanent legislation, that instead of being called the Interim Protection of Informal Land Rights Act, it should be called the Protection of Informal Land Rights Act. Our advantage is that if the government were ever to fail to renew Ipilra, we could immediately go to court to say that it was in breach of Section 25 and Section 25(9) of the Constitution, because Section 25 of the Constitution promises tenure security, and Section 25(9) says that government must introduce a law to give effect to tenure security. So if government ever allowed Ipilra to lapse, they know there would be an immediate constitutional challenge. And that's the only reason that they have continued to renew it, because they certainly haven't enforced it. I want to just take up another issue that I think both Tim and Mavuso mentioned, which is the humility of the speakers. You know, when Nonhle spoke, she didn't talk about the fact that her own life is in constant danger, that she has to have bodyguards to protect her and her children, that it's not just Bazooka Khadebe that was killed in the fight against Bolivarian, but 2 other people as well. You know, when Sabelo Dladla spoke, he didn't talk about his father. His father who fought this extraordinary battle and until he died, and died in this struggle, and how other people have been killed in that area. We have Bekiseni Mavuso here, who has been threatened with death and had to go into hiding numerous times. We've got people from the Bapo Bamukhale who were attacked by the mine's ambassadors, who attacked them viciously at the infamous Moimoi police station. So when people tell these stories with humility, they don't often bring across the risks that they and their families are taking every single day to try and keep these laws at bay and to try and keep hold of their precious land. So I want to just talk a little bit about this intersection between law and practice, because given that the Communal Land Rights Act was struck down and the TCB was defeated in Parliament, all of these deals done by traditional leaders are unlawful. They're unlawful because the traditional leaders never had the power anymore to do them, but they're also unlawful in that the traditional councils didn't ever bother to include women or to have elections. And that's why these recent judgments, the Maledu and Baleni judgment, and by the way, we have Mrs. Maledu, who's the first applicant in the Constitutional Court case amongst us here today, who bravely fought that case. This is our greatest ray of hope. So I want to just talk about how, in a way, those judgments that come in and expose this legal lacuna have resulted in the slew of laws where government is trying to finally make legal the things that have been happening unlawfully. And it will never be able to do that because to give traditional leaders the powers to decide about other people's land rights and to take away people's decision-making authority is in contravention of the Bill of Rights. And yet they kick for touch, time and time again, because what's at stake is current deals. So they know that these laws will be overturned, and they'll be overturned not least because of inadequate consultation in Parliament. But we need to really understand why is government continuing. And we've got to look a bit at the scale of what's going on. We've got to look at the fact that 600 million rand was stolen from the account of the Bapu Bamukhale in Northwest, a deeply impoverished community, and it was stolen from accounts held in the office of the Premier of the Northwest Province, Supra Mohammed. And those accounts were never audited. Why not? It was only possible because of government collusion. We've got to look at the fact that we have a report now showing that the Bakata Bakapela, with their extremely rich platinum deposits, have lost 25 billion rand in value. And who has profited? Of course, we know that there are senior government officials who are involved in those deals, but actually most of that money has ended up offshore. And big South African names like Brian Gilbertson and these mining magnates, because they have done deals that have to be done in secret because they are unlawful, have in a way managed to turn those deals to their enormous advantage. I mean, when Nonhle was talking about the Chinese and the Russians, a lease that John Clark recently brought to light shows how King Damase and Damase of Western Kondo land signed a lease for 30-kilometer strip of coastline in Port St. John's to a Chinese company which is going to have a Disney World, going to mine, going to have a fishing factory that's going to displace all the local fishermen, and the rent that they're going to pay is 1 million rand a year. And in exchange, he promises to clear the land of all the people living south and north and in Port St. John's. Now, what kind of a deal is that? And why does he and the Chinese company think they can get away with something that is in breach of all the environmental laws, coastal laws? It's because laws like this encourage traditional leaders to think they have absolutely unfettered powers. And investors have got away with similar deals. We know there are similar deals signed by the Ngonyama Trust in KwaZulu-Natal with Indian and Russian companies, where big swathes of coastland are given over for harbours and armaments factories and other things. And these are the Chinese and Indian investment companies that the President and his teams go to visit to solicit investment for South Africa. And what does this investment do? It basically strips our people of their land rights and strips us of our environment. So, the problem is particularly bad in mining areas, but it's also bad in other areas where there isn't mining. And there, the particularly dangerous thing that's happening now is that traditional leaders are insisting that people pay for land. Even land that those people got in the 80s and 90s. They're turning up and saying, pay me 10,000 rand or we're going to evict you. A recent case in the Eastern Cape High Court was about Nomakwezi Base, who had obtained plots in the 1990s, and another plot later, and a whole lot of other people had obtained plots. And the head woman came to them all and said, pay us 10,000 rand or get out. And they said, why should we? We've got houses here, we've built these plots, we were here long before you turned up. And she got her henchmen to basically close off their houses and start demolishing their houses until they got a judgment in the Eastern Cape High Court that interdicted her from interfering with their property rights. Now, if the traditional courts were in place, she could never have gone to the High Court to stop those evictions. So, as people have said, this is not about just big mining, it's also about the intimate way in which people are refused to bury their dead or told to pay for their land and forced to pay levies for things which they don't agree with. So, what's happened is that the resistance that Connie described has culminated in two really important judgments last year. First was the Maledu judgment in the Constitutional Court, and second the Tolobeni judgment in the North Gauteng High Court. And both of them basically upheld that Section 25 of the Constitution secures tenure rights, and the Interim Protection of Informal Land Rights Act of 1996 gave effect to that by saying people can't be deprived of those rights except with their consent or by expropriation. And it was just after the Constitutional Court judgment that the TPLB was amended to say that, notwithstanding any other law, chiefs should be given this right to sign these kinds of deals. So they are actually trying to produce laws to counter the victories, the hard-fought victories that people have managed to win by reference to the Constitution. And really, I think, the key point is this, that what do these laws do? They deny that rural African people have property rights. They assert that the chiefs own land. And they deny that rural African people have decision-making authority in respect of their land. Now, decision-making authority is a feature of all systems of property rights. And those two denials are what colonialism did. When the whites said we're taking this land, they said we're taking it because what these people have got is some sort of primitive system that doesn't amount to property rights. This land is free for the taking. And then they said these people can't be citizens because they're subjects of chiefs, and we are the more senior chiefs. And that's exactly what the National Party did. So really what we've got now is our government defaulting to the very ideologies and excuses that we used during colonialism and apartheid. And the tragedy is that what we're seeing here is, instead of a country that's looking at building agriculture or building mining so that actually we can produce metals, we're looking at a country that, because of different factions and interest groups, sees its quickest route to wealth as looting downwards, looting the people below, looting the poor and the vulnerable. So it's either at a big scale, big mining companies, run by senior ANC people, relying on these laws to get around compensating people properly or obtaining their consent. And then you've got the next tier of mining companies, the fly-by-night coal companies that are also relying on these laws. And then you've got the traditional leaders who are saying, not only must we be paid, but we will use that authority to extract money from people by whatever means, and money that basically is money that those people don't have. So really, I think the tragedy of all of this is not only that we have a government that is colluding and dispossessing people, but we have a government that has no vision of development other than one based on looting and dispossession.